we finally have it, the first gaming and non-gaming benchmarks for AMD's Ryzen 9950X3D chips. But first, there could be good news for NVIDIA's next-gen. Games get faster on Intel CPUs, and the first third-party benchmarks for Intel's next-gen desktop CPUs. Welcome everyone to Gamer Melt. First up for today, it looks like we have a battle of the leakers. Okay, not so much a battle as leakers can simply hear different things. These companies are huge, they work with tons of other companies, so things can get twisted. Either way, if you saw my last story, you know that Moore's Law is Dead claimed that NVIDIA's upcoming RTX 5090 could cost as much as $2,500. And in that video, I was of course pretty pissed off, I would say rightfully so, but there's another well-known leaker who's claiming that leak isn't correct. As many of you know by now, the leaker Cobite7Chemi has been extremely accurate when it comes to NVIDIA leaks in the past. And in a response regarding that price leak, you can see it right here, he claims that it's totally fake. Now, I'm not here to pick a side or anything like that. I just want to talk PC hardware. So, in a follow-up, he says, quote, "I don't believe there will be a significant price increase for RTX 5090. Now, the question here is, what does he mean by significant? Would the lower $2,000 number qualify as significant? I would definitely say so, but I'm not really sure what he means here. And how about it not be more expensive at all? Has no one thought about that? Of course, there is inflation and higher costs on better nodes, etc., but $1,600 for a single graphics card is already outrageous if you ask me. Oh, and I forgot to mention that WCCF Tech also said that no AIB or partner has been briefed on an official or even an expected price of the next-gen lineup. Ultimately, I'm not sure who's right here, but I'd honestly say that any price increase is too much at this point. No matter what the price of the 5090 ends up being, you know it won't be cheap. So start learning a new skill in a field you love with today's sponsor, Brilliant, the only place I trust when I want to learn something new in computer science. And the reason is simple. Unlike other platforms, at Brilliant you learn by doing with thousands of interactive lessons in math, computer science, data analysis, programming, and more. Each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving, which is a method that's been proven to be 6 times more effective than just watching lecture videos. And you don't have to put in a ton of time either. Just learn a little every day and develop your new skill at your own pace. Plus, you can learn on the go with their incredible mobile app. So stop waiting and learn your new skill today, because when you visit brilliant.org/gamermeld, you'll get a 30-day free trial. Plus, they're offering my viewers 20% off their annual premium. Once again, that's brilliant.org/gamermeld or use the QR code right here. And next up for today, we have an update on Intel's application optimization. For those who don't remember, this was something that they introduced not too long ago, where basically they were optimizing their big and little cores to better work, well, in this case, specifically with gaming. And as you can see in Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, it got a 13% performance increase, and in Metro Exodus, it saw a 16% performance increase. Now, you'd be forgiven if you forgot about all this, because there hasn't been all that much news since the original announcement, some discussion about older generations, things like that, but there's some great news because Intel just announced multiple new games are now supported. Specifically, we're looking at 12 new games for a total of 26, well, very popular games. You can see we're looking at Company of Heroes 3, Counter-Strike 2, Cyberpunk 2077, Dirt 5, Dota 2. Now, I will go ahead and say that it doesn't seem like they've given what kind of FPS performance boost that we should expect from this, but if it's anything like these here, it should be fairly decent. Either way, if you have a supported CPU and if your actual system is supported, you can see right here it says available games for supported systems may vary based on configuration and graphics card. If a title is not listed in the Intel application optimization user interface, it hasn't been validated for that specific system configuration. Basically, if your computer does support it, you should be able to go on there and get that optimization right now. And next up, we have some of the first benchmarks for, well, third-party benchmarks for Intel's next generation desktop CPUs. I'm of course talking about the Core Ultra 200 parts. And what's interesting about this is the fact that these are basically official. I mean, they are third-party in the sense that they come from MSI, but they're official in the sense that, well, they obviously have these samples early and are able to test them out. Now, this does come from a leak by Hardware Lux, who is actually posting these. Now, these are under embargo, but as I said, this is a presentation from MSI. And starting things off, we have the CPU package power and temperature for the Core Ultra 9285K. And as you can see here, it does have the power limit unlocked, and it's comparing the Ultra 9285K to the 14900K. And starting things off with the CPU package power, you can see that it dropped nearly 50 watts. Then the CPU package itself, it went from 373.32 to 349.08. And that certainly is pretty impressive, but what's really wild is the CPU temp went from 92 degrees all the way down to 77. But what's even more impressive is that they were able to do all of this while being quite a bit faster. As you can see here, this one comes from Cinebench R23, and the Ultra 9285K is faster than the 14900KS as well as the 9950X. And once again, we are talking single core, but even in multi-threaded performance in Cinebench R23, the 285K still comes out on top versus the 9950X. Now, with that said, you'll likely notice that none of these slides have gaming. And of course, that's not too big of a surprise, given the performance that we saw from Intel's own presentation with the announcement of these. But like I said then, this really is still impressive. This will likely boil down to, if you solely game, you probably want to go with one of AMD's X3D chips, but if you more focus on multi-core workloads, we're talking more professional workloads, you may be better off with Intel's next gen. Either way, these are still looking fairly impressive. And lastly for today, while sticking to this MSI leak, the company also shared performance numbers for AMD's Ryzen 9000X3D chips. And of course, this obviously confirms 9000X3D, though given all the leaks that we've seen about it, this really isn't much of a surprise, but it also gives us performance. And starting things off, we have gaming performance, where you can see we have the 16-core Ryzen 9000X3D, which is likely the 9950X3D, as well as the 8-core Ryzen 9000X3D, obviously more than likely the 9800X3D, and these were compared at 1080p with the RTX 4090. And as you can see, Far Cry 6, this one got the best hands down of the 3 games tested. Over here, the 8-core saw a 13% increase. Now, this is versus the 7000X3D chips, and it saw a 13%. Then the 16-core saw an 11%. Now, moving on, you'll notice the percentage increase really isn't all that great. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, we're looking at 4%, and then Black Myth Wukong, we're looking at 2%. And obviously, that isn't all that impressive, but keep in mind that this is only 3 games, and at least when it comes to Black Myth Wukong, given we're talking 60 FPS here, it is likely GPU bottlenecked. Either way, this obviously doesn't look all that great, but don't forget that this is already the absolute best gaming performers right here anyway, and a lot of games are typically bottlenecked at the GPU anyway, so keep in mind that pretty much any kind of performance increase we see with the CPU is going to be a good thing. I mean, don't forget just how much Intel's CPUs went up in terms of single-threaded performance, and yet they really didn't see much of a performance increase when it comes to gaming at all. But here's the thing, the gaming performance really isn't the big upgrade here. If you saw my recent video, you know that this leaker actually claimed that the multi-threaded score for the 9000X3D chips can actually beat the non-X3D Ryzen 9000. And if we look right here, we can see this is Ryzen 9000 X3D CPU performance versus the non-X3D, and this is in Cinebench R23. And starting things off, both of these, as you can see, just like what was already predicted, the single core score is slightly less, but when we move to the multi-core score, now this says minus 0.2%, but you can actually see that we're looking at 42,375 versus 42,377. So from most benchmarks, that actually puts this higher than the 9950X, but at least here it shows that it's slightly less. But then when we move to the 8 core, it actually beats it by 6.5%. Now, you might be thinking this isn't that big of a deal given we already have the 9000 chips, but don't forget that the 7000 X3D chips were significantly slower than the non-X3D chips. So you had to choose which one you actually wanted, but now you don't have to choose. You can have the fastest gaming CPU and at least close to the fastest consumer chip for professional workloads. This, of course, depends on Intel, but at least within AMD's system, you can have the fastest gaming chip and the fastest professional workload chip. Basically, AMD's 9000 X3D chips are looking like a serious upgrade, though we do need to see more gaming benchmarks. So while that does it for today, are you getting excited for AMD's Ryzen 9000 X3D chips, or does this look a bit disappointing? Let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to try out Brilliant at brilliant.org/gamermelt. And as always, have a great day.